If there's one thing people have grown irritated by in recent years, it's celebrities using the media as a soapbox for their grievances. But 2025 has seen the rise of something even more irritating: celebrities who go on and on about their grievances long after their projects and profile have dimmed. From Leslie Headland to Simu Liu to John Boyega, 2025 was the year of Hollywood figures who just couldn't let it go.
I'm disappointed in your species.
In mid-2024, Leslie Headland's The Acolyte face-planted onto Disney+. Disgruntled fans and YouTubers and reasonable human beings started mocking the series for having made lesbian space witches a legitimate part of the Star Wars canon. Headland clapped back at that reading, telling an outlet about two of the main characters. As a gay woman, I knew it would read that their sexuality is queer, but there also aren't any men in their community, so a closeness between the two of them would be natural. It seemed plot-driven. Well, you made your queerness and the absence of men and the self-insert identity politics the drivers of the plot, with a super thin veneer that it was just a matriarchal society, which literally zero people bought for a second. She went on to say, "Honestly, I feel sad that people would think that if something were gay, that would be bad. It makes me feel sad that a bunch of people on the internet would somehow dismantle what I consider to be the most important piece of art that I've ever made."
Screeches.
The compound whining sanctimony of that sentence, the sheer creativity of that construction of events, may ironically endure as the most important piece of art that Leslie Headland has ever made. Still unable to let it go, she rambled to Collider. Everybody knows what review bombing is like. I understand the point of it, which is that the average viewer would look at the site and say, oh, the user review is really low. But I think that if you're in the Star Wars fandom, I think you already know what review bombing is. So I guess if you're totally new to the fandom and you're considering watching the show, it could affect you. I don't know if I think that because behind the scenes we all know what it is. It's not that it's not concerning, but I think it's pretty expected, I would say. By the time that rambling, semi-coherent spiel had petered out, the calendar had ticked over into 2025. This November, Headland, still unable to let it go, went on to discuss the impact of Star Wars content creators on the Acolyte's performance, and said Hollywood uses them almost like focus groups. The content that is being put out by the streamers or the studios is being snatched up by these other creators, and so commentaries, synopses, live videos, all of the ways that these creators make money, through viewer-based ad revenues and their Patreons. That's a lot of money to be made, she said. But it revealed to me that there is a misunderstanding between the studios and that engagement. They think of it as fandom, and in many ways it is, but studios use it almost like this focus group. Leslie, if they'd treated us like some consequential focus group, they would have listened to our protestations after The Last Jedi and other dud projects half a decade before your show was given the green light. I wish we had 1/10 of the cultural sway you ascribe to us. There are some of them that I respect, she blathered on, and there are some of them that I think are absolutely snake oil salesmen, just opportunists. Then, of course, there are the fascists and racists, so it runs a gamut. Again, the pouring about in the same old litter box, an entire year after discourse on the doomed series had gone stale and the culture had moved on. The same preoccupations, framed largely the same way, the same conflation of the critics, the insinuations about their motivations, the shrewd, resigned belief that the reactionary forces marshaled against her hadn't been on the level, borne along by opportunism, metrics, and performative outrage, positioning herself as a casualty of a pop-cultural meat grinder in a culture too philistine, too coarse, and too close-minded to give her $250 million feebly self-indulgent lesbian space witch series a fair shake. Headland also touched on her now-dashed hopes for Season 2, saying, "It could have been worth it to allow the audience it was meant for to find it." Which is an astonishing sentence, given the marketing budget for the first series alone would have been probably close to the annual GDP of the country I live in. As if, despite this, attention to the project was like a sensual whisper amid an air-splitting din of dude-bro recalcitrance. Still unable to let it go, Headland confirmed last month that The Acolyte would have gone on to feature a connection between the Stranger and villain Kylo Ren. I don't know what's worse: the wistful revelations of the never-to-be-filmed ongoing plot points of a show that has been dead for a year, or the media outlets for printing such irrelevant drivel. Leslie Headland's defensive narrative was, and continues for some strange reason, to be made up of blame deflection, conflating thoughtful critique with bad faith trolling, simplistic causation, treating fandom negatively or review bombing as the primary cause of cancellation, rather than acknowledging multiple intersecting factors, and using backlash as a rhetorical shield. John Boyega. In June 2020, during a Black Lives Matter rally in Hyde Park, Boyega stood atop a ledge with a megaphone and denounced systemic racism, police brutality, and racial injustice in both UK and US institutions. He declared, "I don't know if I'm going to have a career after this, but fuck that." He was applauded by other actors and later reassured by directors that his career was safe. In the heat of that cultural moment, perhaps having experienced being overlooked or perhaps stereotyped during his climb up the industry ladder, his speech was certainly coming from a place of sincerely felt grievance. Thing is, the actor, known for his role as Finn in Star Wars, then went on, months later, to blast Disney in GQ, making international news, alleging, "I'm the only cast member whose experience in Star Wars was based on their race. They gave all the nuance to Adam Driver, all the nuance to Daisy Ridley. Let's be honest, Finn was sidelined." Nuance to Daisy Ridley? She was a hollowed-out, two-dimensional girl boss apotheosis, hyperfeminist fever dream with virtually no interiority or personality at all. "You knew what to do with Daisy," he went on. "You knew what to do with Adam, but when it came to Kelly Marie Tran, when it came to John Boyega, you know fuck all." He criticized what he interpreted as marketing dishonesty. Finn was marketed in The Force Awakens as the future Jedi lead, only to be pushed to the side. He criticized Lucasfilm executives, specifically for confused and incoherent treatment of characters of color, tokenization, saying studios don't know what to do with non-white people. It seemed like he got everything feasible off his chest. But into 2021, the actor, whose credits include the character of Finn in the Star Wars films, made a string of comments on being a black man in Hollywood, alleging Hollywood punishes black actors who are politically outspoken, that black characters are still written via white gaze stereotypes, and that studios want the image of diversity, not the work of diversity. These were not isolated complaints. They almost became Boyega's entire public brand and wavelength for 12 to 18 months.
I've been internalizing a really complicated situation in my head.
What John Boyega perhaps doesn't seem to get is that his gripes about representation were subsumed in a larger paradigm of Kathleen Kennedy's vision of visibility and inclusion for women. He also neglects to mention that Oscar Isaac's Poe Dameron also slumped into character underdevelopment, including having his masculinity made ironical, and that the character of Kylo Ren, a neurotic, ill-disciplined man-child, also stalled out in terms of potential and presence throughout the trilogy. He alleges that the fandom will allow black sidekicks, but woe betide the studio if they touch their heroes. Somehow oblivious that much of the fandom was incredulous and practically clawing the air in frustration at how Luke Skywalker, emblem of optimism and hard-won growth, was reduced to a hobo consumed with regret. Or perhaps most egregious, the reductionist approach to Han Solo, who after taking on more responsibility and valor in the original trilogy, had regressed almost farcically into being a reckless, calamity-prone, seat-of-the-pants renegade again. But Boyega still wasn't done, and continued to drag this cross into 2023. Reflecting on his career, defined largely in most people's minds by his portrayal of Finn in the Star Wars films, he described his Disney years as a hard lesson in how Hollywood uses black talent, and said he had lost patience with corporate diversity messaging that isn't backed by action. Still not feeling the messages struck home, Boyega kept up his commentary on such issues into 2025, still regularly mentioning anti-blackness in casting. These are almost always phrased as lessons learned from Star Wars. We know this context because Boyega is generally recognized for his performance as the character Finn from the Star Wars films. Simu Liu. In multiple interviews throughout 2021-22, Liu, known for his role in Shang-Chi, framed Shang-Chi as a breakthrough for Asian masculinity in Hollywood. Superhero, romantic lead, non-neutered, often contrasting it with a long history of typecasting. Then, over the last couple of years, Liu, familiar to many for his role in Shang-Chi, continued to post and comment about the scarcity of Asian men as romantic leads, often framed as, if one Asian male-led romance underperforms, the studio concludes, Asian male romance doesn't sell, whereas white male flops get infinite retries. He would offer up versions of this argument in various interviews, con panels, etc. But he still wasn't done. This November, Liu, whose film credits include the Marvel film Shang-Chi, wrote, "Put some Asians in literally anything right now. The amount of backslide in our representation on screen is fucking appalling. Studios think we are risky." He alleged that Asian actors are still treated as a financial gamble, while a white dude will lose $200 million twice and roll right into the next tentpole lead. He explicitly called the industry a deeply prejudiced system, and said the level of regression since the late 2010s representation wave is fucking appalling. His theme now was, "We had a diversity push. Hollywood is quietly rolling it back and blaming the numbers, while letting white leads fail upwards." In interviews about his post-Shang-Chi work, the star of the Marvel film Shang-Chi has said that many of his roles were not written as Asian, and that he fights to keep them non-stereotyped, implying that default casting still imagines leads as white unless someone pushes back. By 2025, Liu's public presence had calcified into a near-permanent critique of the system that made him famous. "I don't dislike, really, any of these people, or anyone who gets involved in the performing arts for that matter. But sometimes you've got to pull together, mate. You can't keep playing the same card." Sidney Poitier didn't go on radio shows or Johnny Carson and maunder on and on about the industry or the haters, or go on in publications about their own revisionist headcanon. Instead, he made himself indispensable. He honed a sense of gravitas. He made great choices. He imbued scripts with deeper registers of presence and characterization and mood far beyond their original scope. He was provocative through his restraint, poise, and integrity. Somebody get in touch with these guys' agents, and please, please, get them some new work.